When you get to a certain age and your life doesn't look the way you thought it would, that can be very confronting. And when you are a woman and this idea of what success was going to be, this idea of partnership, marriage, family, career, all the things, this idea that many people have created, successfully or not, when you have that as a halo over the life that you feel like was going to mean this is when you made it, or you got to finally have your dream life, and it's contingent on these things that don't all happen, or you get to a certain age where having a child, for example, is no longer really an option, at least not naturally. That can be very, very confronting. This video is for the woman has who identifies with some of the things that I just shared. This is for the woman who maybe signed up for a life and maybe even genuinely believe that's a life you wanted. But I do also believe that a lot of us created that decision because that's what a successful life looked like. That's how we've been living for centuries. That's how we've gathered is a successful life. Of course, when women started to come out of working in the home and also working in the workplace, that was expansion and also a lot of challenges because it's a lot of work to basically have two huge jobs. And it's also been shifting and changing. Generationally, we've been changing. We're part of a time in human history where we are evolving in such rapid ways with technology and how that's changing this new industrial revolution and how it's changing the workplace. And then, of course, things like politics are really disrupting us now. And if you're a woman that's like a Gen X woman or maybe even an older millennial and you have not had, and you're a career woman, especially if you're a career woman, I say that because that's part of what I'm speaking to and what I can relate to. And you have not created the family or you have not created the partnership and you feel this loss, this grief, that is very, very real. And I just want you to know that you are not alone. And this video is really talking about some of the components of that and perhaps may give you an expanded understanding or other ways of looking at how you might be holding your life and your idea of your life and your understanding of your life. And maybe you'll walk away from this video going back and reevaluating and looking at your life from a different perspective in a way that might help you move forward in different ways. At least that's my intention. I'm somebody who has essentially been studying the human condition for over 20 years. I have a master's degree in spiritual psychology, which is a unique degree, and I only bring it up to share that it did give me a lens, and the lens that it really, if I'm going to nutshell it, it's like it's the orientation that I'm not a human with a soul. I'm a soul having, using, and learning from my human experience, and that I chose to come here. I chose here to have this experience of being a human being. And then that means, oh, I happen to be born at this space and time when all this change is happening, when all these things are happening, when population is, well, it was for a long time, exploding. Everything that you're challenged with, everything that you're feeling sad or anything, any part of your life that's not the way that you want it, it's all sitting in your consciousness through a decision and a belief that you've created or locked into. We suffer based on what we choose to believe and hold on to and make our truth. And when you can expand that, or when you can transcend that or transform that or heal that, that's when life can shift. That's when new awareness of who you are can shift. That's when you can have maybe greater altitude over your life to date. So that's really the space I'm coming from, is that is an orientation that I learned about in my mid to late 20s and now 54-year-old woman. And it was transformational. I mean, it didn't all lock and load in that moment, but it definitely shifted the trajectory of my life because it shifted how I saw myself. And that is essentially the ticket. When we are over-identified with our own humanity, then and don't know how we're a part of something so much greater and so much bigger, then we're basically prey to whatever the constructs and the consciousness is of the time in which we were born. And some of that is real, meaning it's impacting everything all around us. So it's not just one person, it's a collective. But it also assumes that we can't decide something else for ourselves. And there's a greater awakening been happening on the planet for a while now. And there's a lot of disruption happening as well in the US with politics and all of that. But what I really wanted to acknowledge and speak to today is the disappointment or the sadness, or however you might describe it, that your life did not go the way you thought. And any part of you that's thinking something is wrong with you, or that you're missing some kind of special quality or trait, or you took the wrong path, or any way you might be questioning where you are right now, I just really want to blow that up. I really want to help you consider that there's absolutely nothing wrong, not one single bit of your path, and that every single thing was leading you to right here, and that your path was perfectly your path, and it was all about the next step and the next step and the next step. But I'm speaking from experience, personal experience, we can lose a lot of time staying stuck in an idea that also keeps us not being in the present moment. So I did really want to, though, honor and acknowledge the grief and the grieving. That part of what can keep us stuck is that we hide our feelings, or we live in a world that really has done a great job of helping us become really emotionally learned and free and working through our emotions. We've shushed emotions, and then they just get trapped in the body. So if there is a part of you that feels like you miss something, there's an opportunity to grieve the idea, grieve what you feel like you missed or didn't get. When I spent most of my 40s being pretty much trapped in, I say that because I do feel like I lacked a good bit of access to my own joy, because I really was like stuck in that I want to have a baby, I want to have a child, I thought I want to have a family. And I wanted to have that experience. And interestingly enough, a good bit of my younger years, I was really afraid of getting pregnant. I had definitely body dysmorphia issues. I had an eating challenge, I would say, for a good chunk of my teenage and early adult years. And I was really afraid that if I started to gain weight and become not comfortable, more so than I already was, uncomfortable in my skin, that I would be unhappy and that the baby would feel that. And I actually believe that's true. But back then, that really kept me from wanting that to happen. I think I just thought I was going to heal that, or something was going to happen, and that I wouldn't have that anymore. Well, in some ways that did happen. I did get actually healthier in mind, body, and spirit in many ways. And I was really wanting to have that experience. But I don't know that I was actually really mature enough to have that until I was in my 40s. And that's not the way biology is set up right now. I think that's going to shift. But my point is that that is real, and that's a little bit of my reference point. And I was really sad. The reckoning for me was that for whatever reason, I really felt like anything I ever wanted, I was always able to create. And this is something I just had no control. I felt like I had no control over, and that was really hard for me. However you relate to it, I just want to encourage you to let those feelings be yours. Let them come up. Write about them. Get them up and out of your system and your body. And let them be heard. Let them be honored by you. I mean, that's really how we heal. That's how we move forward, is we, just like you might want to, maybe generationally as a Gen X, I don't think we always relate to this outwardly, because that would be being vulnerable in the world as we know it. But we all just want to be seen. We all want to be heard. It's a very natural, primal need to want to feel loved, connected, significant. So those parts of us that are hurting, they just want the same thing. So we don't have to necessarily go and do depths and depths of psychotherapy to get better. What we have an opportunity to do is to become more connected to practices that support us in processing our life in real time. So I offer that for your consideration, that that's an opportunity, that if that's something that you're relating to, that giving those feelings a voice could really, really help. I'm not a physician, I'm not a psychotherapist, so just that is my clear disclaimer. I'm not trying to give you advice as when I'm speaking as a woman who's been there, and that's what's helped me. And at some point, I did have to face it, but I will tell you maybe a little bit further on that what really healed me of that pain was a big experience that happened in my life, and I could never have projected this. I could never have seen this. And in a way, it was like a full circle moment, and it helped me make a lot of sense about myself and my life. Yeah. So when you allow yourself to give it a voice, then you can give yourself the opportunity to describe all the ways in which it's living inside of you, all the ways it might be impacting how you feel about yourself and your life, how it might be keeping you from being present in your life, how it might be because things take on a life of their own. The ego speaks first and the ego speaks loudest, and it will absolutely try to force its will and convince us. But our opportunity is to become integrated, is to bring our heart, is to bring that consciousness forward. And so there can be an integration. And so the ego can be in service to your heart, not the other way around. But these are things that we're not really taught or socialized on. So we're living in a world that's very much driven by the ego and the goal line versus the soul line. And there's opportunity to notice that, to be present with that, to feel it, to give it a voice, to name it. I have a note here. I have my iPad. But what's present for me, what I wanted to acknowledge here is that one of the things that our mind, our brain does is make meaning. We're always making meaning. Our entire personality is literally made up of all the meanings we made that became like our belief system and our perception and our thoughts. And that's what the brain is designed to do. It's trying to understand all the time. But if we don't bring consciousness to it, then we're just meaning making unconsciously. And a lot of times those are not helpful beliefs. Those are not helpful deductions. So whatever you made it mean, that your life did not go the way you thought, that something, whatever, I don't want to fill in any more blanks. I said that at the beginning of the video, but being aware of what did you make it mean that whatever you thought your life was going to unfold, however you thought it was going to unfold, whatever you thought was going to needed to happen in order for you to feel good about your life, knowing that and then acknowledging what you made that mean, that it didn't happen. That's important. It's like shining a light on the meaning making. Any part of you that made yourself wrong or any decision you made about yourself. I know for me, I spent a lot of time feeling like it fed this greater belief that I held for a long time was that it's not going to happen for me. And that was like more initially for my awareness around just access and success and access to the privilege that a lot of my wealthy white friends had, because that's primarily what I grew up around. But it fed that belief further. Oh, it's not going to happen for me. It happens for her. All my friends had these things. And I'll skip for a second and say that one of the key moments where I started to see myself differently, this is probably close to 10 years ago. So I was in my early 40s when I still was thinking, I'm going to find him and we're going to have a baby. I could have froze my eggs and I didn't. I later wished I had, but I didn't because I just believed in God's will for my life. Like, I'm not even a very religious person, but I do believe that I'm part of something greater. And I felt like it's going to happen and it's going to happen in that timing. And I remember I used to go to LACMA here, Los Angeles County Museum of Art in Los Angeles. Every Friday they have these free jazz nights. It's incredible. It's one of the most incredible places to be on Friday nights in LA as far as I'm concerned. And I remember sitting at the bar. There used to be a restaurant. It's all been transformed now, but there was a restaurant called Ray's. And I sometimes would sit at the bar. And one time I was sitting next to this gentleman, is an interesting Black gentleman. He stood out because he was always like, he always had a cowboy hat on. You just saw him coming. And I had noticed him before, but I didn't know him. Well, I was sitting next to him at this one particular night, and we just were getting to know each other. And one thing I really heard that night is I heard myself tell my story. And I don't think I had done that in a long time. So it was like the apex of that moment of whatever consciousness I was in at the time, hearing my story, not having had that opportunity up until now, up until that moment for maybe some time. And I remember hearing my story. While I was sharing it, I was thinking, wow, I've had it really interesting. I was hearing how my life and all my choices were always different from my friends. That I took a very different path. And I remember leaving that dialogue thinking about that and really thinking, wow, I've had a really cool life. And I'm not saying that there was no disappointment. I'm not saying that I walked away and I felt immediately like, oh, okay, I'm okay. No, I was still wanting to have a child, all that stuff. But it was the beginning of me bringing a level of consciousness to choices, to seeing my life from greater altitude, and also seeing that a lot of what was keeping me in the idea that my life wasn't measuring up to what I wanted was a concept I agreed to unconsciously that actually had nothing to do with the conscious choosing of my life on the day to day. It's like it hadn't integrated. I started to see that because I also know that this is like not something I'm going to go down deeply in this video. I'm aware that I had a limiting belief, or at least an awareness of how I filtered my life of like through disappointment, because that was how I experienced my mom. There was a part of my mom that I felt it wasn't ever, she never said it like this, but it's like there was always something. And I know now that that was coming from a lot of unhealed pain in her, inside of her, that she never really looked at and dealt with. But I took that on as a kid, and I, in some ways, saw my life that way. It's like I perpetuated that same thing. That's how it relates back to that. Oh, it's not going to happen for me. So I say that to say that I started to see, oh, your life has been really interesting. You've made some interesting choices. So maybe in the day to day, don't keep seeing your life as like it's not right or it's not enough or it's a disappointment in any way. So I don't know if that's landing, but that was really a beginning of a pivotal time for me to start not keep losing the time or not stay unconscious in that way. So I wanted to mention that part and how this is like a two-part. It created that idea of I was behind for a long time. And especially with women, we have this biological clock, and that's very real. That is so real. And you have every right to feel whatever you feel about that. And I'm just injecting the voice of expansion and reminding you that you are not just a woman, you are a soul. And I think it's pretty fucking cool that we're women and that we get these abilities. But just because you may not have had a child or it didn't go the way you want, there's still so many beautiful, amazing parts of being a woman that is the mother, that is the birther, that is the creator. I just wanted to inject that for your consideration. And that doesn't have to cancel out the feeling. It's just that the opportunity is to allow the feelings, feel the feelings, express the feelings, acknowledge the feelings, all the ways that will help you and help them be heard and cared for. And then keep in mind that there is expanded ways of landing. So that the conclusion you don't necessarily have to stay stuck in is that you miss something. If that's where you land, that's I'm not judging it. I'm just offering for your consideration and also reflecting, because that's what happened for me. But for so long, I felt like I was behind. And I know that I know there's a lot of women that can feel that way because of the biological clock and because of all this. But, we happen to be born at a time where this trying to figure out, how do you have a full-blown career and how do you also create family? And there are women that have done it. There's also a cost. And I'm not trying to make it negative. I'm just offering that it's not necessarily a science. It's an art, and it's an art filled and riddled with a lot of challenge and stress, and lack of well-being and all the things like postpartum and that division and the things that can happen between that. We've lived in a world that hasn't done a great job of creating space for women that have families in the workplace, and it hasn't been easy for us to do it. There's all that, and we can feel victimized to that. But when you see yourself as a soul, not just a woman with a soul, then you can see you just happen to be born at this time where this is still being worked out in this way. That we have to be born at a time where we got to actually create these powerful careers, unlike many, many, many women decades before us, generations before us, that we had greater opportunity available to us that our mothers did not and our grandmothers did not. And that's just part of the time in which we came in. And so it did make it more complex, and it's continuing to be so. So that's what I'm offering to, again, I've said this a couple times now, maybe 5 or 6 times, about the expansion of the awareness and the thought. And then the last thing that I have here in my notes is I'll just share with you. Okay, this last part I want to share with you on. I know I'm wearing a hat. I really was holding this. I mean, I was coming into greater acceptance, but it took me, I feel like, almost all of my 40s to accept that creating a baby was not going to happen. And I looked at other ways. It just wasn't going to happen for me. But the first awareness I had, and again, this is just my experience, and maybe some of this will land for you. And if it serves you in any way, that's the reason why I'm sharing it. At some point in my late 40s, I had this awareness of I am breaking a generational cycle. I do feel like my degree in spiritual psychology did give me, I've been on a personal growth path forever. So this is definitely my journey. And I've been working my process and healing for decades. And that degree was a huge part of it. And it gave me a skill set, and it helped me navigate the world in a way that honestly most people don't. And it's employed me with the ability to truly heal stuff I never thought I could. And also have an acceptance of myself and my life and all these things I've shared with you. And those are some of the ways. And I'm aware of what some of my challenges are, my limitations are, and they've expanded, they've grown, some of them have healed, some of them are still with me. But there's some things that happened in my childhood that has made it difficult for me to create long-term partnership. It's actually healing in ways in these last couple of years in a way that I never could have imagined. So that's a whole other video. But that impacted me. And that's one thing that definitely would have impacted me as a mother. And I'm not saying I wouldn't have been a good mother. I think I would have been a kick-ass mother. I just I just trust that there was something energetically that I wasn't supposed to pass on. It wasn't necessary. And so it got sacrificed in me being able to bring a human to this world through me. And then I went through the pandemic working at a healthcare system. And this is a whole other, I don't know if I've written about this and I could link to it at some point, but essentially I was responsible for the mental health and well-being of a healthcare system of 2,200 healthcare workers that are the Black and brown people, taking care of the Black and brown people that are underserved in South Los Angeles. And how this even came to be was nothing short of serendipity, of miracle, of God's work, basically. And what I got to do there was so unbelievable. It was so many things. It was not easy, and it was soul work. And I remember I was there for almost 4 years. I remember halfway through it, and I was actually kind of ministering to my mom about something, and it came up around this ideal scene that I had written in early part of 2019 when I got that job in December of 2019. And I was sharing with her a couple years past that now, saying, wow, Mom, everything on this ideal scene came true. Everything. I never said what industry. I never said I'm going to work in a healthcare, but everything that I had put on there, including the salary, all of it came true. And why it was so meaningful for me was because I remember that I received an email from an infectious disease doctor asking for my help. And for some reason, that felt so empowering to me. I was like, and humble. Like, I was like, the idea that I would ever be in a position that an infectious disease doctor would be coming to me for support, it was extraordinary. And I was aware at times and reflected this to others when it made sense that we were just a part of something in human history. I mean, you've heard me say that already in this video, that this is what people are going to study 100 years from now. And we have been a part of that. And the people that did the work, we were a part of that. And I may not be doing this story justice, but what I want to share with you is that one of the beliefs that I had attached to myself and my soul about being a mother was that I happen to be a woman, and that's part of my job, and that was part of how I felt like I was completing my agreement, that I was fulfilling my role. And there was a part of me that felt like I had let the universe down, I had let God down. I really felt pain about that. And in a way, that's really an ego idea. It's not in a way, it is. And so, for some reason, or not for some reason, hopefully this makes sense, but when I started to digest this opportunity that I got to serve these healthcare workers, I really was uniquely qualified to help these individuals for many reasons. And I never could have foreseen that for myself. Never. I never worked in healthcare before that. I'd had some healthcare experience through a boutique consulting company, but I mean, all of that was total kismet. And when I had this awareness, I kind of like, it's like a Tetris, it kind of all came together. And I was like, holy, I felt like I got to do my part. I fulfilled my part. And I'm not saying I'm done. I'm just saying that it was like a healing balm to that wound, that idea that something was wrong with me or that yeah. And so I just offer that as perhaps something for you to consider of like how your choices, because I can also say that at some point in there, I would do these like intentions. And at one point, I remember acknowledging, wow, when you do your 10 intentions, your relationship is like 8 or 9. Just, I had dreams about the service and the work I wanted to do in the world. And that's what my life is accumulation of those choices. That was what my life was supposed to be doing. And that's what it is doing. But our mind will decide something different. And I'm offering that that decision is being made based on the time and place you have to be born, the constructs, the ideas of society that we think are our own or we take on as our own because we don't realize that there's alternative, that we actually do have a mind of our own, that there is more. And now we live in a world where so much expansion is happening, so much, I mean, we have access to so much information that we now can see that you can question everything. So maybe question that. Maybe recognize that there's nothing wrong with you. Your path is on track. And if there's something that you want to be different, then spend time there. But honor yourself, honor the net of your choices, good, bad, or indifferent. Like it's all part of you becoming more who you truly are in your own awareness because you don't become more worthy. You are worthy. You don't become more loving. You are loving. What you become is more aware of your loving nature. What you become is more aware of your inherent worthiness. All right. My name is Jennifer Herrera. Thank you for listening. I appreciate you so much. Until next time.